In June 2021, I published a review of the party game So Clover by Francois Romain and Repo Production, a game in which you were given random pairs of words and challenged to create clues for those pairings so that other players can figure out where those words belong on your game board. Now, given this simple concept and the vast number of games hitting the market, it may be no surprise to find that other games with a very similar concept have been released at roughly the same time, such as Crossed Words by Evan Davis, Nick Little, and Indie Boards and Cards, which was released in late 2020, and the game Cross Clues by Gregory Crard and Blue Orange Games, which appeared in late 2020, early 2021, depending on where you live. These all play in roughly the same way, in which you are given a random pairing of something and must create clues based on that pairing. They have similarities to them, but they play out very differently. Two of them are cooperative. Crossed Words is competitive, so that's one big difference. But before we talk about how they compare to one another, maybe first I'll give a short overview of how they all work, starting with So Clover, a 1-minute wrap-up. To get you started, you can check out my full review if you are curious to see it in more detail and have further examples of gameplay. In So Clover, each player receives a game board, a marker, and 4 random cards. Each card has 4 words on it, and you'll turn over these cards and put them at random on your game board. Keep those cards secret as you place them on your game board, and then for each pairing, write a single word clue on the adjacent leaf. Try to be as clever as you can, making connections between those random words, and then once you are finished, remove all the cards from the board and add an extra card from the pile. Once everyone is finished, you'll take turns revealing your game board, shuffling the cards that you have, now 5 cards with the random one added, and reveal them all for other players. They can rotate the cards as they wish, they can plant them on the board, trying to figure out where things go, and then once they are confident they have everything matching as well as they think is possible, you reveal which cards are in the correct place. You remove whichever ones are incorrect, they get another shot at doing it, and you will score 0 to 6 points depending on how quickly they solve your challenge and how well they do it. Your score in So Clover tops out at 18 to 36, depending on the player count, 6 points times the number of players, but typically we don't record our scores or even track them as we are resolving each player's boards. We just enjoy the challenge of coming up with clever clues and then deciphering the clues of other players. Cross Clues feels similar in that it is a cooperative game and you are trying to help one another fill a grid as well as you can, but there is a time pressure to the game, which puts a little twist on how things play out. To set up cross clues, you place letters on one axis, numbers on another. For an easy game, you would use only the letters A to C and the numbers 1 to 3. For an intermediate game, A to D, 1 to 4, or an expert game, A to E and 1 to 5. You are going to place a code word card under each letter or number. These have 4 words on them. There are 50 cards total, so there are 200 different code words, and you're going to use 6 to 10 based on the setup in the game. You are then going to adjust the clue deck so that it contains only cards matching what's in play. So in an easy game, you would remove all the E's and D's and all the 4s and 5s. In an expert game, you will use all of these cards. Each player will draw a clue card and then you will start the timer. In an easy or intermediate game, you have 5 minutes. In a difficult game, you have 10 minutes. So you can flip over the sand timer or use the timer on your smartphone. Each player is going to get a card. They look at these cards and they are going to show a letter number combination. For example, E1. If I hold this card, I need to think of a single word clue that will get people to guess fast wardrobe. So maybe I say joggers, for example. Whenever I have a clue, I give the clue. I just say, okay, got one, joggers. So they're going to look at what is here and they can debate as much as they want. Of course, the time is running the entire time. Someone pulls the trigger and says, okay, we're going to guess. And if they guess E1, I reveal that card. I draw a new one from the deck. And now I'm going to give a clue to something else. If they guess incorrectly, I say nothing, and I throw this out of the game face down. No one knows what this was other than me. But in any case, I draw a new card and start again. The goal is to fill up as much of the grid as possible in the time you have available. So by throwing this out, well, we have a maximum score now of 24. If we guess correctly, oh my goodness, I have no idea what I would give right now for A4 under the time pressure of recording this video. Trailer and spider. Anything come to mind for you? Leggy setup. Camping? Maybe camping. If we go with camping. If you look at the choices here, trailer is probably the best choice for camping. Spider might be the best choice, except you might say trailer and friends. Maybe that would go together. Trailer and fear, depending on experiences you've had in the past. It depends. Often you are wanting to hold a clue card until some other spot is filled. If someone guesses and pretend this is A5, and now you're like, oh, now I can definitely say camping because out of these 4 choices with trailer, they'll probably pick spider. Sure, I guess. Maybe that's how it's going to work. And you're going to draw another card and continue. So it's an interesting setup in that as the game progresses and more things get filled, if you get to something like this where 4 of the slots in painting have been filled and you draw D4, you could probably just say Picasso and they're going to be like, well, it has to be painting, right? Doesn't matter that this is spider. Doesn't matter. D4, done. Yes, that's correct and go. So the game speeds up over time, or at least the clue giving process speeds up over time as the grid starts to get filled because certain possibilities are out. If I look at the answer, oh, how about that? I just drew D4. There we go. I draw something else and I look at the start of the game, this open field. I have to consider all the possibilities. What clue can I give that would really narrow down the choice? The more we throw away, the lower our score. And for some reason, the score does matter in cross clues, unlike in So Clover. And I think that's for 2 reasons. One is the time pressure in the game itself. You are sitting, staring at a clue card, knowing that you have to give a clue at some point for this card. You don't get to change cards out of your hand. In a 2 and 3 player game, you have 2 clue cards in your hand, so you have some options available to you where ideally one of them is easier to give than the other, and then spaces will get filled up. And that clue card, the secondary, harder clue card, will become easier over time because there are fewer options available that players can guess. But you have 1 shot at them guessing correctly, unlike in So Clover where you're presenting 5 cards and 4 clues, and ideally they can match everything up all at once and figure out. Something might seem off, and that might make them figure out that, well, this card must go here and this must go here and so on. They can sort of work out the puzzle and there's no time pressure to figure out where things are. Here, you've got 1 shot and it's hit or miss. You make it or don't, that's it. The second reason relates to how points are scored. In So Clover, you're scoring in discrete chunks where you look at this player's board and this player's board and your board and my board, and we're scoring them all individually. And again, we often don't even track what we scored on each board. By the time we get to the end, we're just like, oh yeah, I don't remember what we scored, because you're looking at the puzzle presented by each player. And that's the fascinating thing, solving that puzzle as best you can, not worrying about the score. In cross clues, you effectively start with the maximum score of 9, 16, or 25, depending on the difficulty level of the game. And then you're throwing them away one by one. Okay, well, now most we can score is 24. Oh, now we score only 23. Oh, only 22. And so on. And they keep getting thrown away bit by bit. So it's a continuous pile that each of you is contributing to, only in a negative way. You are messing up. I gave a terrible clue. I guessed the wrong thing. I didn't figure stuff out, and that cost us. And that feels more punitive. It feels punishing as the game progresses. And so the score does matter. And I tend to find myself holding on and just waiting. Is this the ideal clue? Is this? Which is making it more difficult to actually get through the clues in the time allowed. Because of course, if you end up with cards in the pile when the time runs out, then you've lost those points anyway. You're trying to give the maximum amount of time for each clue. But as I mentioned, the clues tend to come faster as the game progresses just because there are fewer opportunities available. And you're just trying to also race that clock and get things done. Crossed words works differently in that the time pressure is caused only by other players, and the game is competitive, which matters in another way as well. To set up crossed words, you take the 3x3 plastic grid out of the box and place it on the table. You give each player 9 discs in the same color and the matching erasable marker, and you lay out the 4 decks of cards. Take a card from the Starts With deck and place it by the upper left, and the colored marks on that card indicate which piles you draw from for the remaining 5 cards that you will lay out. We got proper nouns, places outside the US, the green up top. We've got 2 things cards going here, things you are allergic to, and things on a calendar. We've got proper noun here, fictional characters, and a miscellaneous card, body parts. Each player then takes their disc and their blank on the other side. You, at the same time as everyone else, now look at these combinations here, the categories that cross over, and you are trying to write something on a disc. And as soon as you write something that matches the intersection of those spaces, starts with P and places outside the USA, you put that disc in the grid. So if, let's say, so everyone's writing in here, maybe I do this and someone else is going in here, and we're all going at the same time. You can write more than one answer for a crossover, and you would drop that in the spot. You can do as many as you wish. And you are going to continue writing things until someone has placed all 9 of their discs in the grid. And when that happens, the round is over. You are then going to look at each category and see whether someone has written a valid answer. Now, if people have written down the same answer, if someone else also wrote Paraguay, then we would throw out our answers. So category style, you need to be unique. You possibly don't want to write Paris as the first thing that comes to mind for starts with P and places outside the US, because other people might do the same. You need to be possibly a little more inventive. So Paraguay, if no one else has said Paraguay and everyone agrees that yes, Paraguay starts with P and is a place outside the USA, I don't know if there's some Paraguay deniers out there, well, then you put the disc aside as something that will score. So it starts with P you're allergic to, and I wrote peanut butter, which someone else might have as well. If not, it goes in the pile. If someone else did, it just goes back to me. So you're going to compare all the disc here. You go on and on. The only other actual answer I wrote down, Farrah Fawcett's hair. So body parts on a calendar, sure, that works. As someone who's 50 and remembers calendars from long ago. Whoever has placed the most disc on the side will score 3 points, and you can just use these cards to record points. So I've got 3 points if I have the most. If we tie, then someone else will score 3 points as well. The player with the second most disc gets 2 points. Next player gets only 1 point. And everyone else, because the game goes up to 6 players, will get nothing. You then erase all of your disc, turn over new categories, and start again. Starts with L. Numbers. Numbers starting with L. All right. Vacation spots contains A, B, and C. And then ends with a vowel and biblical names. Whew. This is a rougher set of choices, I think. Starts with L and numbers. Okay, starts with L and contains A, B, and C. All right, numbers that end with a vowel. A, B, and C that ends with a vowel. Biblical names and vacation spots. Now, the rules mention you can be quite clever with your clues if something comes to mind that works for both categories. So examples they give, if If one of these were colors and another were men's names, you could write Fred because Fred contains red. Perfectly fine. Or a color in a band name, Pink Floyd, because you've got the color pink and the entire thing that you wrote is the answer for another card. You continue playing multiple rounds until someone has 7 or more points, and the player with the most points wins. I've played So Clover 9 times on a review copy from Repo Production with all player counts 3 to 6. Cross Clues, borrowed from the BGG library, has hit the table 8 times with player counts 2, 4, and 5. By comparison, Crossed Words, also borrowed from the BGG library, has come out once for a 4-player game, and none of us were eager to try it once again. There are 2 main reasons why Crossed Words failed in comparison to the other 2 games. Now, one reason was because the nexus of possible things that you can write down feels far larger in So Clover and Cross Clues, primarily because you are presented with single words, or perhaps a compound word in Cross Clues, and you have lots of associations that come to mind. So if you're presented with cow and knight, you have all these cow things, you have these knight things, and you sort of imagine this Venn diagram of overlap between them of what possibly works. So horse comes immediately to mind because knights ride horses, and horses are 4-legged mammals, or perhaps saddle because a knight will sit in a saddle sometimes, and saddle, you probably don't saddle cows, but you saddle horses, and so you sort of get there in time. Or maybe a lance because knights carry lances sometimes, and a lance would be used to skewer an animal, which a cow is. Sure, that'll work. There's all these possibilities for things that come together because you're presented just with single words and you just flow from there. What else did I have? Castle. I mean, obviously if knight and castle comes up, great. Castle and cow. Maybe you do Monty for Monty Python and the Quest for the Holy Grail. You think of the cow being catapulted to the castle, or you just say catapult. That'd be more direct, perhaps, if you know that other people have seen that movie. Or just the possible concept of something, maybe the other things in this line are things you would not catapult. And sure, you'll catapult a cow, and castles will have catapults. Or there's more possibilities that come to mind because of the simplicity of the concepts that are presented to you. Things are more open-ended in what you come up with. I had grabbed a pair of So Clover cards with pyramid and pliers. And think of construction comes to mind just because you were constructing the pyramid over long periods of time, and pliers are a tool, a work tool. Maybe you think of a triangle because, again, you've got a work tool with the shape of the pyramid. I'm not sure exactly what else you want to come up with except for tools, perhaps. Or you can have bricks. I'm not really sure there. Needle-nosed? No, it's not going to get with pyramid, except maybe there's a pharaoh and needle nose. I'm not really sure. But there are more things that come to mind. It's more of a creative process, where with crossed words, often the categories presented to you feel like they're very restrictive. So when I showed in my example, starts with L and number. I had a hard time coming up with this, but eventually I landed on lone, L-O-N-E, like lone wolf. Lone is a word, starts with L, and it contains the number 1. Cool. But that took a lot of work, and it was far more along the lines of thinking of words that start with L, and then how could any of them have a number associated with them? I thought maybe lots, like how much of that do you have? I got lots, but that's not a number. Less than 100? I mean, I guess it works, but it's not really, it's not feeling right. And then you have other things as well. Starts with L and contains A, B, and C. I thought a lot about this and could not come up with anything. And this is much more of a generative process where you've got some prompts and you have to come up with something. You're generating an answer rather than a creative process where you're presented with raw material and things sprout from there for what's possible. What else? Other things we turned up before. Biblical names and vacation spots. This was a total blank on me. I do not know the Bible at all. And vacation spots, not sure. Or vacation spots and boys' first names. Both both of these and lots of the possible things that came up. Song titles, vacation spots. I'm not good with song title names, so again, this isn't working for me. Or here we go. Song titles and things that make you sweat. Well, gonna make you sweat. Sure. Dance. You can do any sort of rapid dance song, perhaps. Restaurant that are cold. It's much more with these sorts of categories, presenting you with things, at least from the way that I've experienced, where I have to imagine a list of things, and then I'm going down that list and trying to cross-reference it with the other category to see what might fit. Again, it's not a creative, thoughtful process of coming up with some connection, but it's more about processing down the list. And so often we would be playing crosswords and you're in a race against other people to write down your disc, but often we were just sitting there just trying to think of something and we couldn't come up with something, and we were just like, I'm just going to write down 6 places outside the USA that start with P and just be done with my disc, and we'll end the round, and hopefully something more interesting will flip up next time. It just didn't lead where I wanted it to lead. It was, I want to say harder, but it was less interesting. I mean, harder is okay, but let me have something out of that. Now, this leads into the second reason why crosswords felt very different, and that is because it is a competitive game, whereas the other two are cooperative. With So Clover and Cross Clues, I'm coming up with something, typically in a more interesting manner or more creative fashion, or some sort of tentative connection between the two. But it doesn't matter whether they really connect, as long as you think they connect and you do the right thing. You choose the right spot in Cross Clues, or you place the card in the right spot on my game board in So Clover. As long as you do that, it doesn't matter. I'm just trying to make a connection with you, and ideally we're thinking along the same lines, and we get there. With crosswords, you're putting in an answer, and then if you flip it over and someone's like, yeah, I don't see the connection. I mean, you can argue for it if you want, but in the end, everyone else is going to vote whether to accept your answer or not. So it feels like you're almost being punished again. Like you have to not only do this cross-reference with the list, but get something that you're pretty sure everyone is going to accept. And sometimes things are a stretch and you're just like, well, I know it's a stretch, but I'm going to put it in it anyway because, again, I got to write down 9 things if I want this round to end. So I'll just do it. So it just felt more like work rather than something fun and interesting. And I hate the F word. I hate to bring out the fun word to say why a game wasn't working, but again, it felt more like we were coming up empty, just staring, and eventually just being like, I guess I'll do this, rather than like, again, with those other 2 games, or with something like Code Words, where it's just you're finding this thing that will work, this weird connection that was created solely because of the connection of these 2 words in the game, and now you came up with something from it. And it creates memories to do that, rather than more of a trivia recall list. Now, of these 2, So Clover was my preference over them. These are very similar in feel, but So Clover won out for me mostly because I dislike the time pressure. I don't care so much about doing things in time. I'm fine with timed games, but So Clover gives you the opportunity to create a coherent puzzle where you're presented with all the cards, you're coming up with 4 clues, you can sort of play off a clue that you create on one side. You're like, this is a solid clue. Absolutely, they're going to get it. And when they get it, they know these 2 cards go in, which gives me a word up here and a word up here, and then they can work from that. Okay, they figure this is absolutely true, so this must be here, and then we'll work off and blah, blah, blah. And you're creating a puzzle, a solid puzzle, ideally solid, that you did, and are presenting it to other people to figure out. And it's a unique challenge. And again, that's possibly why I don't care about score so much. It's about solving the challenge presented to you by one of your fellow players. Where this, you've got one shot. You give the clue, someone's going to guess, and maybe they get it, maybe they don't. There's no going back. Where here, if they make a mistake, well, everything's connected together. They get a second chance to do it. This is just like one and done. You also have the issue that I've seen a number of other people bring up in the forums in BGG, where someone will give a clue, a third person will say E3, and you're holding E3, and you're just like, nope, not E3. I think it's whatever else. And the other person says, no, it's definitely E3 because of this and this. And now you're in this situation where you could say adamantly, I know it's not E3. And everyone else now knows that you hold E3. And so whatever you say in the future, they can say E3 and you get it done. But it feels like a cheat. Or you can just be quiet and hope that everyone reasons out that it's not E3 because, that idea just doesn't work. But if they guess wrong, well, okay, then you threw away your chance. It's a weird situation and it doesn't feel good. One BGG user had the suggestion of coming up with a deck of 2 clue cards where you'd make your own deck. And so E3 would appear twice in the deck. And potentially I hold E3 and the other person does have E3. And now we don't have that situation. Potentially E3 is the correct answer. And if we guess E3 and we fill in that spot, I just throw away my E3 and I draw a new clue card. And every time you draw a clue card that matches the space that's already filled, just throw it away and draw another one. And so now you're presented with an open-ended challenge where you don't have an answer that's locked off. That's possible to do, but that's not the game as it's published, and it has bad feelings when that happens in the game. Also, I generally dislike, I understand it works, I dislike how the clues become easier over time, where you can give that Picasso clue and get painting because it's the only painting slot available. It works with the time limit because you spend most of your time with those first early clues where everything is more open and there's greater chance of you messing something up. But I don't enjoy it. It feels like less of a puzzle challenge, unlike this, again, where you're presented with something all at once and figure it out. So there's overviews of there. Now, clearly, these two are quite enjoyable. I've had a lot of good experiences with them playing with other people. Crosswords was more like a design lesson for why something doesn't work when you're presented with the similar type of challenge and where it went wrong. Now, clearly, the designers liked it, felt it worked. Other people might like it as well. Maybe you have a different experience and you can talk about that. But this feels more like, because of the reasons explained, it leaves a very different feeling that is unsatisfactory compared with these two. There's probably other games along the same lines that I've missed. Who knows? Maybe they're out there and you can give other suggestions and then we can look at them in the future and see how they compare to what's covered here.